Hi, welcome to our video. For today's topic, we will talk about Incoterms. So what is actually Incoterms? Incoterms actually stands for International Commercial Terms. So Incoterms actually is a set of rules and responsibilities of sellers and buyers for their goods. These rules and responsibilities are recognized by governments, authorities, and practitioners worldwide. And these terms are provided and issued by International Chamber of Commerce back in 1936. And the main purpose of Incoterms is to reduce misunderstanding. So how does it reduce misunderstanding? This is because in the whole world we have many countries, and many countries have different cultures and different language. So the Incoterms will provide set of rules and terms to reduce uncertainties, and this term will be designed for parties to a contract, and when they have a set of contract, it will avoid misinterpretation in different countries. And as I said just now, Incoterms is just set of rules and responsibility. So Incoterms does not do these things, which is Incoterms does not service for contracts. Incoterms also does not determine the transfer of title, and Incoterms actually did not determine the breach of contracts. And Incoterms also do not protect risk of loss. And Incoterms is not contract of carriage, insurance, and financing. Incoterms is actually just a set of terms and rules. So it does not cover anything of the goods, for the goods. So as I said, Incoterms is just set of terms and rules. So these are the terms and the terminologies in this chapter. And actually these terms we are very familiar with. Firstly is shipper. Shipper is actually a person handing over the goods for carriage, and shipper is also a person who makes contract with the carrier. And for example, if you buy books from Shopee, the seller will make contact and contract with the carrier, for example JNT. Next is delivery. Delivery is buyer's obligation to accept delivery of goods, and it is used to determine when the seller has fulfilled delivery obligation. And next terminology is usual. Usual is the practice that the person in the trade frequently do. As we frequently do business with the company, we can see the practice and what they always do in the business, in the trade. So and we know what their usual is. And next is charges. Charges, as we all know, is a fees. Fees for what? Fees for imported goods. And the fees will be paid according to import regulations. And next is seller's obligation. The seller must provide goods and invoice, and this seller's obligation also must pay the cost of checking operations. And lastly is buyer's obligation. So the buyer must pay the price of the good as per contract stated.
Hi, my name is Adam, and for this part, we're going to talk about the list of Incoterms. Okay, so first we have EXW, EXW, which is name of place of delivery. Here, buyer bears max obligation while seller bears minimum obligation. For the buyer, they bear risk and cost of bringing goods to final destination, which is from seller to him or her. Their responsibilities include loading goods onto vehicle for all export procedures for onward transport, and also all costs arising after collecting goods. Lastly is to complete all export documentation with the exporter, like export reporting and clearance processes. As for the seller, they have no obligation to load and clear goods for exportation. Their responsibilities include make goods available, ensure goods are suitably packaged and at specified time. In example, seller's factory, depot, or warehouse. Next, we have free carrier, FCA, name place. This one is only usable for containerized goods where the buyer arranges for the main carriage. The seller's responsibilities are exporting clearance, and also if delivery occurs at the seller's place, the seller is responsible for leading the goods onto the buyer's carrier. Thus, seller is in charge of clearing the export and delivery. As for the buyer's responsibilities, they need to choose a carrier for the delivery of goods, and they also need to unloading after delivery and loading into their own carrier. Next, we have free alongside ship, FAS. This one is name port of shipment. It is only usable for non-containerized sea freight and inland waterway transport. The buyer, they assume all goods costs and risks starting here. Their responsible is to load all goods and all costs. As for the seller, they deliver the cleared export goods when they are put along vessels chosen by buyer at the named port of shipment. Packaging and export clearance and security are their responsibility and costs. Next, we have free on board, FOB, named port of shipment. Seller delivers goods cleared for exports and loaded on vessel at the named port. Then, once goods are loaded, risk and cost shift to buyer. Similar to FAS, it is only usable for non-containerized sea freight and inland waterway transport. But, however, FOB is still used for all modes of transport, regardless of the contractual risk. Next, we have cost and freight, CFR. This one is name port of destination. Well, the seller arranges and pays for transport name port. They also deliver goods, cleared export, and loaded board on vessel. Here, they shift their risk to buyer as goods are loaded on board, which is before main carriage takes place. They are not responsible for insuring goods for main carriage, and they also pay goods carriage up to the named port of destination. Other than that, there's also cost, insurance, and freight, CIF. This one, the seller clears goods for export and delivers them when they are on board the vessel at the port of shipment. Seller's insurance is only used for minimum coverage. Buyer bears all costs related to unloading the goods at the named port of destination and clearing goods for import. The risk shifts to buyer once the goods have been loaded on board, before the main carriage takes place. The insurance policy should be in the same currency as the contract. Then we also have, we're not done yet. CIF is the most common. Why is that? Because there will be a stronger grasp of shipments. So, in summary, seller takes responsibility for all costs until the cargo is loaded at the origin port, but the cost passes to the buyer at the specified discharge port. We also have carriage paid to CPT, name place of destination. Okay, this one, the buyer is not responsible of any risk of loss or damaged goods, and they are also not responsible of additional costs for situations happening after the goods have been delivered to the carrier. As for the seller, they prepare the contract on usual terms at his own expenses for the goods carriage to be agreed destination using usual route. If not agreed upon, seller may select a place which best suits his purpose. We also have carriage and insurance paid to CIP, name place of destination. CIP is only usable for any modes of transportation. Okay, this one, the seller, they have 5 responsibilities here. One of it being arranging carriage to named place, ensuring the goods transportation costs related to delivering goods, procuring minimum insurance coverage to the named place of destination, and lastly, clears the goods for export and delivers them to the carrier or another person imposed by seller at the named place of shipment. So that's all from me. Thank you for your time.
So first, delivery at place, also known as DAP. Once goods are ready for shipment, the necessary packing is carried out by the seller at its own cost so that the goods reach their final destination safely. The risk passes from seller to buyer from the point of destination mentioned in the contract of delivery. The seller is responsible for arrange carriage and for delivering the goods, and custom clearance in the importing country needs to be completed by the buyers at its own cost and risk, and including all custom duties, taxes, and unloading. Next is delivery duty pay, also known as DDP. This term means that the seller assume all the risk and cost of transport and pay all applicable taxes and import custom. The buyer has only to unload the goods at the final destination. In some countries, import clearance procedure are complex and bureaucratic, and so best left to buyer who has local knowledge. Next is Incoterms group. There are four groups. First, Group E, Group F, Group C, and Group D. So free carrier, also known as FCA, the seller hand over the goods cleared for export into the custody of the first carrier at the named place. So next is free alongside ship, also known as FAS. The seller must place the goods alongside the ship at the named port and must clear the goods for export. This is applicable only for maritime transport and not for multimodal transport. Next is free on board, named also known as FOB. The seller must himself load the goods on board the ship nominated by the buyer. Cost, risk being divided at ship rails. The buyer must instruct the seller the details of the vessel and port where the goods are to be loaded. Next is Group C, main carriage pay. First is SCFR or CNF, cost and freight. The seller must pay the cost and freight to bring the goods to the port of destination. However, the risk is transferred to the buyer once the goods are crossed the ship rail, which is only applicable only to maritime transport. Next is CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. It is exactly the same as CFR, except that the seller must in addition procure and pay for the buyer insurance. This and also this is applicable only to the maritime transport. Next is CPT, carriage paid to. The seller pay for carriage to the named point of destination, but the risk passes when the goods are handed over the first carrier. Next is CIP, carriage and insurance paid. The seller pay for the carriage and insurance to the named destination point, but the risk passes when the goods are handed over the first carrier. Lastly, the group D is arrival. This group covers shipment where the shipper or seller responsible, and when the goods are arrived at some specific point. The term usually involve the service of custom broker and freight forwarder. First, DDP, delivery duty paid. The seller pays for all transportation costs and bear all the risk until the good has been delivered and pay the duty. This rule places the maximum obligation on the seller. Next is DAT, deliver at terminal. The delivery take place by providing providing the goods to the buyer after unloading from the arriving way of transport. Lastly, DAP, delivered at place. The delivery take place by providing the goods to the buyer after it is ready to be unloaded. Under this term, the seller bear all costs and risks associated with transporting the goods to the agreed condition. So, next is we will talk about the main features of the Incoterms 2010 rules. First, two new Incoterm rules, DAT and DAP, has replaced the Incoterm 2000 rules, which is DAF, DES, DEQ, and DDU. The number of Incoterm have been reduced from 13 to 11. Next, ICC has decided to classify Incoterm into two groups, which is first, multimodal transport, and seawater waste transport. Next is electronic communication. The last version of Incoterm rules has specified those documents that could be replaced by EDI message. Now, give electronic means of communication the same effect as paper communication, as long as the parties are agree to the contract. So, number 6, insurance covered. The Incoterm 2010 rules are the first version of the Incoterm rules since the revision of the Institute Cargo clauses and take account of alteration made to these clauses. So, number 7, security related clearance and information required for such clearance. There is concern nowadays about security in the movement of goods requiring verification that the goods do not pose a threat to life or property for reason other than their inherent nature. So next, number 8, terminal handling charges. Under Incoterm rules, CPT, CIP, CFR, CIF, DAT, DAP, and DDP, the seller must make arrangement for the carriage of the goods to the agreed destination. So last but not least, string sale. The seller in the middle of the string, therefore, perform its obligation towards its buyer not by shipping the goods, but by procuring goods that have been shipped. That's all from me. Thank you.
And lastly, we'll go to choosing the appropriate Incoterms. As you all know, there are many Incoterms, and we must know when to apply these terms. Firstly is FOB. With FOB, the delivery obligation is not fulfilled once the items have passed the ship's rail, but rather when the goods have been returned on board. For CFR, unloading is responsible by the buyer, but in some cases, seller is also responsible for the unloading according to their agreement. For CIF, the transfer of risk from seller to buyer, and usually it happens when the goods are delivered on board the ship. And for VAT, certain countries does not allow VAT by a party other than their local importer, and VAT will be excluded when the parties agree to DDP. And lastly, EXW and DAP. ESW are usually not advisable for seller when payment are made through credit, and DAP method also not advisable for buyer when payment through credit. Thank you.